Hello and welcome to a video with me, Raindale. And today we're taking a look at the Golem raid, how to prepare, what kind of teams, units to bring in, what kind of rewards can we expect from that raid. So without further ado, let's dive right in. And the first thing I want to talk about is the rewards, right? Before seeing what kind of team you gotta bring in, let's see if it's actually worth it for you guys to farm this raid. So the new item that's coming in here is the Defense Bracer, and that's an accessory. It's equipable by everyone, and in terms of stats, it's not bad for an accessory. It doesn't give as much defense as the Elf Cloak, for example, because if you're running the shield version, you're only getting 16 defense and 280 HP. So that's about 150 less HP than the Elf Cloak would give you. But what you do get in exchange for that is a little bit of evade, spirit accuracy, and a completely different ability. So while the Elf Cloak would give confusion resistance and piercing resistance, this one gives you disable resistance, which is arguably very, very important. And then also missile resistance, 25%, which is really, really high, but only for 3 turns. So it's interesting. It's an early game defense against missile teams, but then again, against missile, it's kind of a game of how fast you can rush them to kill them. So 3 turns just might be enough for you to get to them. So it's a very interesting piece of accessory. I would say it's really niche against either missile teams or teams that can disable you. Otherwise, you're probably going to want to run something else. Something interesting as well is that it can be run as an aim version with 15 accuracy, which isn't terrible. The other recipes that you can get are the Alexandrite ring, and if you were to get a +5 version of that, you can have a piece of accessory that gives you +40 accuracy, and that's the highest you can get in the game so far. But if it's only a +0 version you're running, you only get 20 accuracy, and at that point there is better accuracy gear than a +0 Alexandrite ring. It also gives 5% resistance to all elements, so a little bit of defense, but again, nothing compared to the Defense Bracer now, or the Elf Cloak, which are other accessories. And then the other one you can get recipes for is the Elf Cloak. It was the accessory given in the previous raid, so if you farmed that, you probably have a lot of recipes already, or you might have some of them maxed out. But what it does give is 16 defense, about 450 HP, and then for a +5, you're getting some pierce resistance, 10%. So it's a really good piece of gear as well. And these are the 3 things that you can craft from the Golem raid. So now let's take a look at the raid strategies, and I put the bonus units for this raid on screen. You only need to bring 1 of those. If you bring several bonus units, you don't get more bonuses. And then it's nice if you can fit them in your team comp to have the bonus units, but it's not make or break. The rewards for clearing, even if you don't get the bonus raid points, are still pretty good, especially since they added the random drops where you can get extra items from a raid that you defeat. But I want to quickly talk because originally when raids came out, the only real way to farm them was in multi-rooms. But for the last couple of raids, we've had people running and building auto teams that can clear in 1 run or in 2 runs. And there was a lot of talk about the importance of clearing in a single run, because you don't use any orb, right? Your first run is free, and then your second run costs you an orb. So if you can clear it in 1 go, you can basically clear the raid at will, as long as you spawn more of them. And that I just want to point out that it is not necessary to clear in 1 single run in order to get a +5. If you clear in 2 runs, you use an orb for every clear. And over the course of the raid week, if you use 1 orb for every clear that you do, which means you're running the battle twice, you have plenty of materials to craft a +5. I've done that for the last 2 raids. I have a +5 Elf Cloak, and I +5, I believe, Shinden? No, the Bale Bergonet. There we go. I've managed to craft those, and I was running auto teams that could not necessarily clear in 1 go. They would often clear in 2 runs, and I was still plenty fine. So you don't have to stress about building an auto team that can perfectly clear it. If you can clear it in 2 goes, you will be fine, and you will be able to have the rewards that you want. as long as you don't want to craft 10 plus 5s. In that case, yeah, you might need perfect runs. So now let's take a look at the actual raid. So here are the stats for Golem. He is slightly weak to wind, but only by 10%, so it's not really important to run wind against him. It's not a huge deal. His other resistances, however, are pretty high, especially missile and slash. So we can't really run missile against him, and slash unless you're running Gilgamesh or Winter Ramada and can reduce his slash resistance. It's going to be pretty hard. What he is weak against, though, is magic. And he also has some defense and 0 spirit, so that also reinforces the power of the magic side. And then on top of that, he has a faith of 90, which means that magic attacks will hit him even harder. He's an Esper type. You could bring some Esper killer using the sniper job, but snipers being ranged attackers, they probably won't do much to him themselves. And then he's immune to AG Break, but not immune to Steal Time. So if you're running the raid manually, you can use Steal Time to build bigger chains and then deal a ton of damage. What he will do to your team is earth magic damage, and he has some single target attacks, some AoE attacks, and then the super large attack that we've seen in the Siren raid that hits in a 5x5 diamond pattern. So he can hit in a very large AoE with earth magic damage. So building magic resistance will be very strong towards keeping your team alive for the entire battle. So what kind of team comps do I think we'll be seeing against Golem? I think the most common will not be wind, actually. It will be Holy Chain. And the reason for that is magic damage does not chain. So you need the element from the magic attack to do the chaining part if you want to build a chain using magic attacks. And right now, the most common type of magic attack is the light type, because a lot of characters, even though they are not light element units, have access to Holy, or a Holy version of the calculator job. So I think the Holy Chain will be a really nice way to fight him. Notable units for that will be Halloween Little Leela, because even if she's hitting and there's no way to build a chain right now, she can use a wind attack to deal a bit of extra damage, and she can also heal. So that's really everything you want from a character in a raid. Kilfei, her limit break reduces magic resistance further, so she will be a really good unit for making the rest of your team hit even harder afterwards. Then we have Valdira, again, healing, light damage, pretty strong, and her limit break can kind of quicken your team to get a couple more hits in, possibly. Ayaka can also heal and deal light damage. Sakura can deal very high light damage and build a light chain by herself with her limit break, so that's very important. Then again, you could use Rosa light damage with Holy and then some healing. Grace is a very interesting MR character for this because she has a really high magic resistance from the get-go, so she can basically tank Golem's attack very, very well and then use Holy and heal. And then Elshra is an interesting character as well because she has a Light Imperial in her Rune Knight subjob, so she could reduce Golem's light resistances into the negatives, meaning that everybody else on your team then hits harder. Her own attacks, however, are rather low with Drain Evocation, but I guess she could use some Quicken to make other people hit again. So there would be ways to make her work in a raid team. Then the second type of team is one that we've seen for pretty much every single raid, and that's the //dark chain. And for this raid, I would say you really, if you want to run this team, having a Gilgamesh or a Winter Ramada with her limit break will be very, very useful. The reason I prefer Gilgamesh, though, is because he can use Kotetsu several times, so that means that even if the debuff expires, he can reapply it, whereas Winter Ramada is limited to only one time, where she can debuff slash resistance. But since Golem has a 25% resistance, not naturally, you'll be fighting against a resistance, whereas if you use Kotetsu, he's actually going to be weak to slash for a couple turns, which means you can build chains and then hit him really hard. And then why Dark? The main reason is because there is a lot of good dark/chainers, and then Dwayne can reduce dark resistance, further increasing your damage, and you can use units like Shadowlinks or Venera to reduce defense. Venera reduces defense and chains. Shadowlinks really just chains. Ruin Sterns can chain and reduce defense as well, so there are a lot of good units for this. You could also run other slash units. There are a ton in the game. You could build Light Slash, possibly. El Sorel is a bonus unit, so you would get extra points if you were to do this team. I'm sure the Orlando strategy using Crush Armor and using a Lightning Imperil would work well again, but you could not run that solo because you can't run a couple different Orlandos on your team. So yeah, Slash, if you can use Slash resistance down abilities like Gilgamesh's Kotetsu, it will be a viable strategy. Then the last strategy, and I don't think this will see much play, is the Wind Chain. And the main reason why I don't recommend this is because aside from Halloween Little Leela and Howlet, the other characters that you would bring would be fighting against Golem's resistances. So there aren't that many characters that can leverage his wind weakness and not fight against even bigger resistances. Still, if you want to do that, Halloween Little Leela is good for all the reasons mentioned above. Uldoa can reduce defense, and then with the Exorcist card, if you have it, she can do 3-hit attacks, which will build a chain, so that might work well. Howlet can imperil wind resistance and then deal large wind magic damage, so he would be really good for this. He's also a bonus unit. And then, well, Lucia can chain, and she could go for strike attack instead of missile, which will be a little bit better against Golem's resistances. Yerma is actually a great option, because her limit break reduces single target resistance, meaning everyone else on your team will then hit harder. She also has steal time, so if you're running it manually, she can then ensure that the rest of your team chains even more. And then Elena is kind of a iffy character pick. She has Imperil, which is a wind attack that further reduces resistances. It's really, really strong, but she herself is extremely squishy, so she might go down early in the raid and not provide as much as you would want. But if you can find ways to protect her, she's actually a really good unit for this as well. So what about gear and vision card? There are a lot of options here as well. I want to begin by talking about gear, because I think in raids, the TMRs that you bring are really important because they can give you additional options. So obviously, Xyz's Bells will give you more AP, meaning you'll get to cast more abilities and just generally perform better. But then Kaleido Moon from Medina is also a great option. It increases attack, magic, and AP generation for all your team for a couple turns. It's a really good turn 1 when all your characters are grouped. Then Saint's Circlet is also a great one, a little bit less good than Medina's TMR because it doesn't increase AP generation, only attack and magic. And then Bravery, but that won't be as handy as having extra AP. Then you could also run Miranda's TMR, because in a short AoE it will increase slash and magic attacks, and as we discussed, slash and magic teams will probably be what is used against Golem the most. Then if you're running a physical team, Uldoa's TMR will give you 50% defense penetration and a little bit of AP generation, so that's very good. And then Kane's TMR actually gives haste to a unit, and that's really handy for possibly getting one more attack in before the boss moves, so getting chains off of him again. So it can be a really good offensive TMR as well. Then if we're talking about vision cards, in raids, generally you want to increase your damage limit, so Two-Headed Dragon is great for that. You could also do that with the Mind Flayer MR vision card if you don't have Two-Headed Dragon. Then you want to increase your agility. If you're running a magic team, then the Black Rose card will be great for that. Otherwise, the Scion of House Beowulf would probably be better, but it's limited, so you might not have that. And then it's all about increasing your offense. So Ramu is great for more magic, Trousseau for magic attack, and then the Scions of Shadows for more light damage if you're running the Holy Chain. If you're running slash attacks, you might prefer using the Echoing Screams card and just Ifrit or other offensive cards, maybe also Diabolos if you're running the Dark Chain, so that's up to you. If you're running the Wind team, you might want Tetra Sylphid for more damage, so just go for offensive stuff in general, it's going to improve your performance. In terms of defense, the only attacks that Golem will do on your team are magic attacks, so if you're running Fenrir for 20% more magic resist, it's going to help you out. And if you're running a physical team, you might want to settle with Dwayne's Irresistible Darkness card, because that increases attack and also magic resistance, although to a lower degree, but it's a card that does two things that you might want, so it can also be very good. And then defensive gear would be any kind of gear that increases magic resistance or spirit. So what I've put there is the Bale Gauntlet, Soul of the Massa, Armor of Light, and Smart Coat. They all increase magic resistance, so I would say they're all pretty good pieces of gear. If you don't have those, then try to build as much spirit as possible, since all his attacks are magical. Okay, so that's it for the Golem part. Now let's take a look at the rare raid, which is Tonberry. The first thing I want to point out is that for some reason, Tonberry is a human type. So that means Mankiller works on him. So bring your Odin Espers, and yeah, just very surprising, but human type, so we can leverage that to our advantage. So he is slightly weak to fire, and then he's pretty weak to strike attacks. In terms of resistances, Slash, again, he's resistant to. He's also resistant to piercing and missile pretty well, and not that resistant to magic attacks. So what we can leverage the best is strike and magic. And then he has the same amount of defense and spirit, so we don't have a specific incentive to use one type over the other here. He also has 50 faith, which is middling. Then, what he does is he has some pierce attacks, and then a typeless fire damage attack that has a chance of applying stop on your team. So that's really scary. That means you might want to bring in ribbons to increase your unit's stop resistance, or units that can dispel stops, so, for example Ayaka. So that's up to you. Then he's immune to agility breaks, but not immune to steal time, so again you can bring units to steal time and then build bigger chains on him. So in terms of team comps, I'm leaving in the Holy Chain and slash Dark Chain teams because I think they're still viable for Tonberry just as much as they are for Golem. But then we're replacing the Wind team by a Fire Chain team, and I think that one is a very strong one because we have a lot of units that are tanky, can build fire chains, and then can deal really high damage as well. The first example of that is Rain. His limit break imperils fire resistance, and then he can do fire slash chains or fire magic attacks depending on what you want. And then he's also pretty tanky, so he's a really good unit for that. Raldor is a bonus unit, and if you have him, well, he's designed to defeat Tonberry. He uses fire striking attacks, he'll be really strong. Delita, if you have him, has the strongest fire imperil in the game, so he's naturally good for this. Oeld will do some decent damage. The boss does have 20% pierce resistance though, so you might prefer running Oeld with his monk job. And then the other options are pretty decent as well. Adelard and Ishtola will do pretty high damage with their fire magic attacks, and then this raid does not have super large AoE attacks as opposed to Golem, for example. So there are low chances that he'll actually get to your back team if you're putting someone else who's tankier in front, so they will probably not go down. Then the other options are a bit less good. It would be Luartha. She has Ice Killer, but she mainly performs missile or slash attacks, so she won't be able to do that much damage. And then the same goes for Winter Mashery, who could do pierce and missile attacks or slash, but again, Tonberry is resistant to all those types of attacks. So that's it for the Fire Chain team. I think you could also build a striking chain team, which I did not put on screen, bringing all your monks and then trying to chain strike attacks, and that might also be strong. And there are a ton of units with a surprising monk job, so you could also build that. But I think the fire chain might be a little bit more reliable since they can imperil, and there's no way to imperil strike attacks unless you have Raldor. If you do have Raldor, yeah, the strike chain team might be a good option for you as well. Then in terms of gear and VCs, I would say the TMRs that you want to bring into this are the same. They're all very, very strong. Another one though that I did not put on screen would be the ribbon from Frederica, because it can give a buff on your units that prevents stop for a couple turns. So if you don't have a ribbon, but you do have a maxed out Frederica, you could put her TMR on someone and prevent stop from this target. Ideally, you also want to give hate to this person so that they're the ones tanking this attack from Tonberry. Then in terms of vision cards, it's still Two-Headed Dragon or Mind Flayer. It is a great option. And then you want agility up, obviously, to build your chain as high as possible. If you're running the fire team, then Ifrit will be a great option. And also the Keepers of the Crystal vision card for the fire attack up. And no matter what you run, this, again, Tonberry is considered a human. So Titan and Blossoms in the Dark might be really good options to increase your damage against him for all of your units, basically. Then in terms of defensive gear, Leviathan provides pierce resistance, which will be strong against some of Tonberry's attacks. And then Ribbon, again for the stop resistance, is a great option. Otherwise, pierce resistance and defensive gear in general will be just what you need. So Elf Cloak and Bale Burgonet might be the best options here. So I think we've just about covered everything about the raid. If I missed something, please let me know. And then if you have comments about this, it's my first time doing a raid coverage, so I'm very interested in hearing your feedback and how I could improve that. So that's it. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this content, please like and subscribe. It will make it more likely that they show up in your feed in the future. And then, yeah, thanks again, and have a great rest of your day.